My jealous sister-in-law invited my ex with schizophrenia to my baby shower. Now she's paying the price. Hey everyone, I'm Vivian, 30 years old and 8 months pregnant with my first child. I've always dreamed of being a mom, and now that it's actually happening, I should be over the moon, right? Well, it's complicated. My husband, Nicholas, has been my rock throughout everything. We met about 5 years ago, a year after a messy breakup with my ex, Jace, who, to put it lightly, has some serious mental health issues. Jace was diagnosed with schizophrenia not long before our split, and managing that relationship was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I don't talk about it much, but it shaped a lot of who I am today. Nicholas and I have a pretty solid relationship. He's understanding, kind, and seriously, the most patient guy you'd ever meet. We got married last year, and we're thrilled to find out I was pregnant shortly after. We've been busy getting everything ready for our baby girl, from painting the nursery to picking out names. It's been blissful, really, despite the usual pregnancy woes. But, as life would have it, not everything is as perfect as it seems. Enter Samantha, Nicholas's younger sister. Samantha and I have had a rocky relationship from the get-go. It's hard to pin down exactly why, but there's always been a palpable tension between us. Maybe it's because Nicholas and I clicked so instantly when we started dating, and things moved quickly from there. Samantha, being the protective sister, was wary of me from the start. Over time, I hoped things would get better, but if anything, they've gotten worse, especially since we announced the pregnancy. You see, Samantha has always been the type of person who needs to be the center of attention, and the arrival of a new family member has definitely shifted the focus away from her. I've noticed her becoming increasingly bitter and distant. At family gatherings, she often makes snide remarks about how pregnancy isn't that hard, or jokes about my needing to keep Nicholas interested. It stings, and I've tried talking to Nicholas about it, but he brushes it off as her just being her usual self. One day, Nicholas and I decided to host a baby shower, a small but cozy gathering at our home. We thought it'd be a great way to bring everyone together and maybe, just maybe, help Samantha feel more involved and less sidelined. Haley, my best friend since college and the godmother-to-be, came over one afternoon so we could dive into the baby shower planning. We spread out all the decorations, invitations, and party favors on the dining room table, a splash of pinks, whites, and soft grays. Haley, with her impeccable taste and eye for detail, was the perfect planning partner. She's the kind of friend who knows exactly when to throw in a comforting smile or a burst of laughter just when you need it. Nicholas, bless his heart, was swamped with work. He'd been pulling long hours at the office, trying to wrap up projects before he took some time off for when the baby arrived. Because of this, he couldn't get as involved in the planning as he would have liked. He'd listen to our ideas at dinner, throw in a few suggestions, but I could tell his mind was often elsewhere, tangled in work emails and endless to-do lists. Meanwhile, Samantha's attitude was growing increasingly frosty. She'd drop by, under the pretense of visiting Nicholas, but I knew it was just to snoop. Her comments were like little needles, barely noticeable until they pricked you. "Oh, are you sure about these colors? They're a bit bland, don't you think?" Or, "Aren't you inviting too many people? It should be intimate." Each word was laced with a subtle disdain, a reminder that she wasn't just uninterested, but quietly antagonistic. One evening, while Nicholas was late again at work, Samantha stayed for dinner. It was just the two of us, and the tension was palpable. Out of nowhere, she started talking about how things had changed since Nicholas and I got married, how the family dynamics had shifted. She wasn't wrong, but the bitterness in her voice was sharp. "You know, ever since you got pregnant, it's always about what Vivian needs, what Vivian wants. Must be nice to have everyone dancing around you." I tried to steer the conversation elsewhere, but she dug in deeper, her words more pointed. It was clear she felt overshadowed, pushed to the sidelines of her own family's attention by my pregnancy. The next day, Haley and I finalized the baby shower plans. We decided it would be held at a quaint little event space we'd booked, thinking it would be easier than having it at home. We sent out the invites, set the date, and began counting down. But the closer we got to the baby shower, the more Samantha's behavior began to really unsettle me. There was a calculated coldness to her actions, a quiet manipulation that seemed to twist even the simplest interactions into something tense and uncomfortable. Nicholas, ever the peacemaker, tried to reassure me that it was all just stress. "Samantha's been under a lot of pressure at work," he'd say, or, "You know how she gets when she feels left out, she just needs a bit of attention." But as much as I wanted to believe him and find some peace in his explanations, my instincts screamed that it wasn't just stress. Something more malicious was simmering beneath the surface. During family dinners, I noticed Samantha's knack for subtly steering conversations in ways that left me feeling isolated. She'd bring up inside jokes or family memories from long before I was part of the picture, watching me with a look that said I didn't belong. My relationship with my in-laws, which had always been cordial, began to strain under the weight of these orchestrated alienations. They weren't outright hostile, but there was a newfound awkwardness, a hesitance in their smiles, and it all traced back to Samantha's influence. It was around this time that Samantha made her most calculated move yet. I still don't know how she pulled it off, but she somehow got a hold of Jace's contact details. One night, Nicholas mentioned offhandedly that he'd seen his sister scrolling through an old yearbook, saying something about reconnecting with old friends. It didn't mean much at the time, but now, piecing things together, it clicked. Jace and Samantha had gone to the same high school, different years, but the same circles. She must have remembered him, realized who he was to me, and used the old school connections to track him down. It was unsettlingly clever and invasive. With Jace's number in hand, Samantha reached out to him. I can only imagine how that call went down, but knowing Jace, it would have hit him like a freight train. Despite our tumultuous past, I knew he still harbored deep feelings for me, feelings that I had long since put to rest in favor of a healthier, happier life with Nicholas. For someone grappling with mental health challenges like schizophrenia, receiving a call out of the blue, laden with information about an ex moving on so publicly, must have been excruciating. Jace was thrown into a state of turmoil. The news of the baby shower, the details of this new life I was building without him, it all came crashing into his world, unbidden and unwelcome. Samantha's voice on the other end of the phone was a catalyst for chaos, an invitation to disrupt the delicate balance of his recovery and my peace. I didn't know about the call at the time, of course. I only noticed that Samantha seemed oddly pleased with herself, a smugness that didn't fit the context of anything going on in her own life. It was as if she had set something in motion, something she believed would shift the balance of attention back to her, or at least away from me. The day of the baby shower arrived, and despite the undercurrent of unease, the morning started beautifully. The event space was decorated just as Haley and I had planned, elegant and understated, with strings of delicate fairy lights, floral arrangements, and soft music setting a serene scene. Friends and family began to gather, their faces lit with smiles and warm congratulations. For a moment, it felt like everything might actually go smoothly. Nicholas was by my side, his usual supportive self, making sure everyone felt welcome and that I had everything I needed. We mingled, laughed, and shared stories. Despite my attempts to immerse myself in the joy of the occasion, there was a persistent knot of anxiety in my stomach, a silent alarm that wouldn't stop buzzing. Then, the unimaginable happened. Through the laughter and the clinking of glasses, there was a sudden, palpable shift in the atmosphere. I turned, following the collective gaze of our guests, and my heart dropped straight into my stomach. There, at the entrance of the event space, stood Jace. His appearance was disheveled, his eyes wide with a mix of confusion and desperation. The room fell into a stunned silence, the kind that screams louder than any words could. The shock of seeing him there, at this intimate celebration of new life, was overwhelming. My mind raced. How did he find out? Why would he come here? Then I remembered Samantha's phone call, and a cold fury replaced my shock. She had done this. She had invited chaos into what should have been a safe, joyous occasion. Nicholas noticed him the same time I did, and immediately stepped forward, his body tense with protectiveness. "Jace, what are you doing here?" Nicholas's voice was calm but firm, cutting through the quiet like a knife. Jace's response was erratic, his words tumbling out in a jumble. "Samantha told me that I had to see her. I had to know if it was true." His voice broke, and it was clear he was not in a stable state. The sight of him, so visibly unraveling, pulled at my heartstrings despite everything, but fear was the overriding emotion. As Nicholas tried to usher him gently towards the door, trying to handle the situation with as little drama as possible, Jace's distress escalated. "No, you don't understand. I need to talk to her," he shouted, his voice rising in panic. The confrontation quickly heated up. Guests started to murmur and shift uncomfortably. Some even began to leave, their expressions a mix of concern and disapproval. I stood frozen, my mind screaming for this all to just be a terrible dream. But it wasn't. It was real, and it was spiraling out of control. "Jace, please, you need to leave. You're not well, and this isn't the time or place." I finally found my voice, though it shook with every word. Jace looked at me, really looked at me, and for a moment, I saw the man I once cared about so deeply, the man lost behind the illness that clouded his mind, Then, something in him snapped, and he began to yell, his words a chaotic cascade that none of us could really grasp. It was heart-wrenching and terrifying all at once. Security was called, and they arrived promptly, thankfully trained to handle situations sensitively. They approached Jace, speaking in low, calm tones, trying to guide him away without causing further distress. Nicholas stayed close to me, his arm around my shoulders, a silent promise of protection. After Jace was escorted out, the mood at what remained of the baby shower was irrevocably tarnished. The guests whispered among themselves, a mixture of concern and curiosity hanging heavy in the air. As much as everyone tried to salvage the cheer, the shadow of the earlier confrontation loomed over us all. Nicholas and I managed to thank our remaining guests for coming, but the smiles we offered were strained, our gestures mechanical. As people started to leave, Nicholas pulled me aside, his expression a mixture of anger and disbelief. "We need to talk about Samantha," he said, his voice low and serious. I nodded, feeling the weight of impending confrontation. We found Samantha in a quiet corner of the room, her face unreadable. "Samantha, did you tell Jace about the baby shower?" Nicholas's question was direct, his tone leaving no room for evasion. Samantha's eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite read before she sighed, a long, defeated exhalation. "Yes, I did," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The confession hung between us like a dark cloud. "Why would you do that?" Nicholas's voice cracked with a mix of hurt and anger. "Do you understand what could have happened today?" Samantha looked away, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. "I didn't think it would go this far. I felt so overlooked, so insignificant since Vivian came into our lives. Everyone's always focused on her, her needs, her happiness, and today was just another reminder of that." The conversation escalated quickly as years of unspoken grievances spilled out. Samantha spoke of feeling sidelined in her own family, of grappling with jealousy and resentment as Nicholas and I built our life together. Nicholas, in turn, expressed his disappointment and betrayal, struggling to reconcile the sister he thought he knew with her reckless actions. Amid this heated exchange, I felt a sharp pain in my abdomen. I gasped, one hand flying to my stomach. Nicholas and Samantha's argument halted abruptly as they turned to me, their expressions shifting from anger to alarm. "Vivian, are you okay?" Nicholas rushed to my side, his earlier anger replaced by concern. I'm not sure," I stammered, panic rising as another wave of pain coursed through me. "Something's not right." Realizing the severity of the situation, Nicholas immediately called for an ambulance. The stress of the day, the emotional upheaval, it had all become too much, and my body was reacting. The fear that I might be going into premature labor was terrifying. As we waited for the ambulance, the chaos of the baby shower seemed to resume, this time with a more frantic edge. Guests who had lingered rushed to help, while others stood back, unsure of how to react. Samantha, looking pale and shaken by the turn of events, hovered nearby, wringing her hands, her earlier grievances suddenly trivial in the face of the unfolding emergency. The ambulance arrived, and I was whisked away on a stretcher, Nicholas by my side, squeezing my hand reassuringly. As we left the baby shower behind, the reality of the situation set in. This was not how I had imagined this day going, not how I had pictured the last weeks of my pregnancy unfolding. The ride to the hospital was a blur of sirens and flashing lights, each passing moment a mixture of fear and hope. Nicholas stayed close, his presence a steady comfort amidst the whirlwind of medical personnel and questions. In the chaos of the hospital maternity ward, as doctors and nurses moved swiftly around me, the gravity of the situation set in. The labor was not only premature, but complicated. The stress of the day had taken a toll not just on me emotionally, but physically. As I lay there, my mind whirred with fear and anxiety. But the concern was not only for myself, it extended deeply to the tiny, innocent life I was fighting to safely bring into the world. Finally, the labor ended, but not with the relief of holding my baby girl. Due to her premature condition, she required immediate and extensive care and was not transferred to me as I had so deeply hoped. Instead, she was whisked away to the neonatal intensive care unit, leaving me with an aching emptiness and a desperate longing to be near her. Nicholas, ever the steadfast presence, held my hand, his face a mask of worry that mirrored my own. In the sterile light of the hospital room, away from the ruined celebration and the shock of Samantha's betrayal, we found ourselves confronting the stark realities of our strained family ties. The echoes of our earlier argument with Samantha hung heavily between us, laden with unspoken questions about trust and loyalty. During one particularly long night, as we waited for another update regarding our girl from the doctors, Nicholas finally broke the silence. "I can't believe Samantha would go this far," he murmured, his voice laced with disbelief and hurt. "I knew she felt left out sometimes, but to endanger our baby, to put you through this, I just can't wrap my head around it." It was then, in that moment of vulnerability, that we decided to call Samantha. Despite everything, we needed closure, an understanding, something to make sense of her actions. When she answered, her voice was small, a stark contrast to the fiery tones of our last confrontation. "Samantha, why?" was all Nicholas could ask, the single word heavy with the weight of our collective pain. There was a long pause, filled with the beeping of hospital machines and the distant bustle of the night staff. Then Samantha's voice came, trembling but clear. "I was scared," she confessed. "Scared of losing my place in the family, scared of being overshadowed forever by Vivian's presence, and now the baby. I thought if I shook things up, made myself central to some drama, you'd see that I needed you too." Her words, raw and fraught with a desperate honesty, struck a chord. It was a twisted logic, fueled by loneliness and fear, and while it didn't excuse her actions, it painted them in a profoundly tragic light. Samantha's motivations were revealed not as purely malicious, but as deeply human, flawed, and pained. However, the revelation did little to mend the immediate rift her actions had caused. "We need some time, Samantha," Nicholas said finally, the decision heavy in his voice. "What you did, it's going to take a while to come to terms with it. For now, we need to focus on Vivian and the baby." The call ended with a somber finality, the digital click echoing like a door closing on a significant chapter of our lives. Samantha had crossed a line that would redefine our family's boundaries, perhaps irrevocably. According to doctors, the complications of my labor required careful management. Every small victory in stabilizing my and my baby's condition brought a wave of relief, but each setback, however minor, felt like a mountain to climb. The emotional tension was palpable, a constant companion alongside the medical monitors and IV drips. Finally, after what had seemed like an eternity, we received the news that things were looking more stable. Our baby, Mia, we had named her that, a fighter from the start, held on, adapted, survived. Every time I looked at her, I saw not just what we had lost, but also what we had gained. A tiny, beautiful embodiment of resilience and hope. However, despite the seemingly happy ending, tension in our marriage appeared. The events leading up to Mia's premature birth had taken a toll on us both. Nicholas had been incredible, a supportive partner and doting father, but the shadows of what had happened with his sister and my ex-boyfriend lingered between us. We tried, every day, to rebuild the trust and ease that had once defined us. It was a slow process, filled with as many setbacks as advancements, but we were committed. We had to be, not just for Mia, but for ourselves. Samantha remained estranged from our family. After the revelations and her subsequent actions, the breach seemed too vast to bridge, at least for now. Nicholas struggled with this the most. She was his sister, after all. The hurt in his eyes when their paths crossed in town, or when her name came up in conversation, was palpable. There was an unspoken grief there, for the sister he had once known and the family harmony that had once been. We didn't know what the future held for her, whether there would ever come a day when forgiveness might pave the way back to some semblance of family. As for Jace, his future was the most uncertain. After the baby shower, he had been taken back into a structured care program. I heard bits and pieces through mutual acquaintances. Some days were good, some less so. My feelings toward him were complicated, a mix of old affection, deep pity, and undeniable relief that he was somewhere that could provide the help he needed. The fear that he might one day return to disrupt our lives lingered, a quiet dread that I pushed to the corners of my mind, focusing instead on the here and now. Our baby shower, which should have been filled with joy and laughter, remained a vivid scar in our memories. The images of that day, the shock, the fear, the sense of betrayal, sometimes seemed as fresh as if they had happened yesterday. But we were learning, slowly, to overlay them with new memories. Mia's first smile, her laughter, the way she grasped our fingers with her tiny hands. As I closed this chapter of our story, I was reminded of how complex life could be, how quickly joy could turn to sorrow, and how the actions of a few could impact so many. Our family remained fractured, a puzzle missing several pieces, perhaps never to be complete again. But within that brokenness, there was a new shape forming, one defined by what we chose to hold on to, what we chose to let go, and what we chose to forgive.